I'm a dog person. I'm allergic to cats, even through Zoom. I would start sneezing.
Well, in that case, I'm very glad I put her away. But it's a pleasure to be able to speak with you. Do you have dogs with you right now?
Thank you. Yes, my husband and I are in East Hampton, and our dog Mabel, who's turned 14 in March, is here with us.
Oh, that's nice. So she has room to run around out there?
Well, she doesn't run around so much anymore.
Oh.
She's really up there especially for a French bulldog. And she's had some health issues. We've been dealing with a lot of that lately. But fortunately, she's doing a little better.
That's good. Well, I mean, it's a crazy time to be doing anything like this, of course. But I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No, of course. I mean, and it's going to be fun just to talk about all the various exciting things you've done. Because I feel like when I was, prepping for this, I kept remembering, oh, that's right. He's, you've had this amazing career on stage. You've had this amazing career as an actor on screen. You've had this amazing career as a voice actor. And I feel like right now, this all ends tomorrow and you're back at work. What's like the one, what area would you most want to be working in?
Well, that would be very hypothetical. Look, I think we have a long way to go. It's going to take a while. I think film and television will come back first. I know there are people working away trying to figure this out, although it's really complicated. And I think the theater will be one of the last things to come back. It's just, I honestly don't know how you do that, how you get 1,200 people in a theater and a cast and a crew. And then, do you test everyone beforehand? Do you clean up afterwards? I did, and you do, work at half capacity. It just doesn't make any financial sense. And so until there's a vaccine or testing, so we know what we're dealing with, and or at least a medication that will help people get through the disease. I really doubt that theater will be happening. The theater is my home, but this has been Penny Dreadful, City of Angels has been just a tremendous experience. So I would, I love doing this first season. So I would hope that that I might be back doing that. But God only knows how that's going to work. I mean, the writers, it was an interesting interview with, I think his name is Kurt Sutter, who, wrote Sons of Anarchy and talking about how you do this. And he was saying, well, it has to start with the writers first, trying to write around these limitations. And then he was saying, the most vulnerable people would be the makeup and hair people and the actors, because they're coming in close contact with one another. I saw that Tyler Perry was starting up 2 sitcoms in July, and that he was sequestering to the casts and crews of these 2 shows, which seems crazy. You say, honey, I'll see you. I'm going to work now for 6 months. See you in 6 months. So that's a weird thing, living in a Tyler Perry pod in Atlanta, trying to put on one of those shows. Yeah, Medea goes to quarantine. I think it's, look, it's going to be a little bit of trial and error, and someone eventually will venture forth and try to do this. I think it is easier if you were going to do that on a film where you're talking, okay, we're going to shoot for 40 days, and you could sequester people, living all together. Although it's going to be interesting. I'm really at a loss. I want to be positive, but when we look at what's going on, if you dare to sit and watch MSNBC or CNN all day, it's pretty depressing, and we have absolutely no leadership. So we're kind of on our own. I mean, you can't really trust what the president is saying, because he's an idiot, and he's a corrupt idiot. So that's. To be honest with you, I can't even take any more listening to, the correspondent showing a clip of Trump and then saying to three pundits, "What do you think he meant by that?" And that's when I start screaming and saying, he doesn't mean anything. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's an idiot, and he's a buffoon. And I we're in big trouble. Oh, I didn't mean to go off on a rant, as Dennis Miller used to say in the old days when he hadn't turned to the dark side. But it's pretty terrifying, and you want to you have to sort of take the word of the scientists who have been working on this, and so we were so ill prepared because the warnings were ignored and downplayed for so long. We wasted so much time. People have died, and he doesn't care. He has no empathy. He wants the economy to bounce back to what it was for his re-election campaign. He doesn't care that 3,000 people a day will die. Just open everything up and we'll make the best of it. It's collateral damage, or for him, voter suppression. Just a very cruel form of voter suppression.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm weary of trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. It's being played out blatantly in front of us. And if people, the fact that 43% actually think he's doing a good job, people should be quarantined for stupidity. I just think it's over. We cannot pretend anymore. And because not only are our lives, our very lives are at stake, but democracy is at stake. So, what were we talking about?
I think we were talking about what it was, if you could do any project you wanted to do right now, what would it be? But
it would be Penny Dreadful's City of Angels.
Season 2. That's
the top of the list. And I would love to see all of my coworkers again. I loved each and every one of them. And after that, I would love to be back in the theater. I was scheduled to do Death of a Salesman, and now that's being postponed until whenever we think we'll be able to come back. But
was Death of a Salesman always a role you really wanted to take on?
Well, honestly, it started about I can't remember how many years ago. Joe Mantello, a wonderful director, and now wonderful, as many people are seeing, a wonderful actor in Ryan Murphy's Hollywood.
He's extraordinary in that.
He and I first worked together on the late great Terrence McNally's play Love, Valor, Compassion off Broadway and then on Broadway, and it was Joe who said to me way back then, and I guess it was 1995, one day you and I are going to do Death of a Salesman together. So we've talked about this for a very, very long time. And then, it was at one point we were talking about it and I felt I was too young to play Willie Loman. And then literally weeks later, they announced that Phil Hoffman was going to be doing it with Mike Nichols. And Phil was like 44, 45. And Joe said, "You thought you were too young." And now, sadly, I really am the right age. So it finally sort of became a possibility when Rebecca Miller gave us the rights, and Scott Rudin is producing it, and so we've been trying to schedule this, and then of course this happened. So I hope we can still do it at some point. But it's been a lifelong dream. It's one of the great classics and of 20th century theater, and certainly it's the kind of mountain I really enjoy climbing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It reminds me of that thing in for Shakespearean actors where, if you're a male actor, there's that expectation that you do Romeo in your 20s, you do Hamlet in your 30s, and then you do King Lear and you retire. Maybe right. Maybe you do some other stuff in between.
Or you do Richard III, which is the character actor's Hamlet. Yeah. Exactly.
You get to wear a hump.
And you get a hump. And I mean that in the nicest way.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, at what point in your career did you really start thinking of, because you did so much work in theater, and then you started getting more and more screen roles. At what point was that something you were excited about?
My friend, Terrence McNally, used to say, the theater's not a stepping stone. It's not something you use to get to film and television. It is an end unto itself. And I've always sort of felt that way. I love the movies and I love television. And I suppose if I really, really had wanted that kind of career, I would have just left New York and moved to LA and stayed there and just pursued film and television. I would go occasionally, and then certainly I would go when I got a job that took me to LA or wherever it might be on location. But for me, the goal was always the theater. I always thought that is how an actor learns his craft. That is how you learn how to do this, to do a performance from beginning to end and figuring it out in front of audiences 8 times a week. There is no better foundation for an actor. And then, I was lucky enough to be asked to be a part of the Birdcage by Mike Nichols. And so there was, a momentary thought of, perhaps this will lead to other interesting film roles. And then it didn't. It led to, Mouse Hunt, which I'm rather fond of because it's such a subversive little family comedy. But it didn't lead to the kinds of things I hoped it might. And there was, it's something I didn't have any control over, other than all I knew to do was to go back home to the theater because they had a more well-rounded view of what it is I did. And Hollywood tends to pigeonhole you and doing a certain kind of thing. When this part came along in Penny Dreadful City of Angels, John Logan, the brilliant writer and creator of it, sent me an email and said, I wrote this part for you and I hope you'll do it. And so I was really surprised. I knew him through the theater in New York a little bit, but not that well. And so this part was extraordinary. It's certainly the most emotionally complex character I've ever been given to play in film or television, and an exciting change of pace in the fact that I'm in action sequences. I'm beating people up. And I'm pistol whipping kids and dragging them to the edge of a cliff and then kicking them in the face. I can't tell you how much fun that is and how thrilled I am to have a stunt double and an action figure. I never thought this would happen. So, and when I said to John, no one in Hollywood would ever have thought of me for this. What made you want me to play it? And he said, well, he had seen me in a production of The Iceman Cometh that I had done with Bob Falls, the director Bob Falls in Chicago, and then we did it at the Brooklyn Academy of Music a few years later, and with Brian, the late great Brian Dennehy. And it was my work in the theater that ultimately led me here, which is really great because John is a wonderful playwright as well as a screenwriter, and it came from Chicago theater. So he was aware of something like that, and that it paid off that he thought of me for this. So I'm incredibly grateful and lucky.
Well, it loops back to what you were saying about how, in theater you were able to find things that really that worked for you, that made sense.
Well, I was able to. I had a little bit of control in the theater. Mm-hmm. I don't have any power anywhere else in film or television, but in the theater, I do. I have a little bit. I have enough to call Bob Falls and say, "Do you want to do The Iceman Cometh? You, me, and Brian in Chicago," and he'll say yes. So I was sort of on a mission at that point. I had been doing, I've told this story now because this has come up a lot because of the nature of this part. And, but about 10 years ago or so, I was doing this musical on Broadway, The Addams Family. So that had been reviled by the critics, and then had a run because the audiences wanted to see it anyway. They didn't care, and so it was successful and ran. And while I was doing it, Charles Isherwood, who was still a critic at the Times, wrote a very flattering piece of an assessment of my career up to that point, and it was very flattering and complimentary. But it sort of referred to me as the last of the great entertainers, stage entertainers. And as I can always find a black cloud in any silver lining, I was like, well, is that all you think of me? I'm just an entertainer. And so it made me question everything. And I was at a bit of a crossroads anyway. And I thought I need to challenge myself, and I need to challenge the audience and its perception of me. It's easier to do in the theater because, as I said, I have a little more clout to try different things, and they're much more accepting of me as an actor. So I saw the Brian Dennehy and Bob Falls had a conversation in Variety about perhaps their longtime collaboration and perhaps revisiting The Iceman Cometh, which they had done in 1990 when Brian had played Hickey very successfully. And now he would play Larry Slade, and they were talking about who might play Hickey this time. So I wrote Bob after seeing this and explained to him why I thought I should do it. And it was a play that I loved and had read as a very young man, and so it's talk about diving into the deep end. Mm-hmm. It's a nigh impossible role to play. It's a very difficult part. It's thrilling beyond belief what he's asking you to do in that play, but it's and no matter what you do, you will inevitably be compared to the great Jason Robards, who played it famously off Broadway and in this landmark production that changed the reputation of the play and made his reputation as a great actor, and certainly he went on to be the leading interpreter of O'Neill. Because he followed that with A Long Day's Journey into Night. So it's a huge mountain to climb. But I sort of, strangely, I like that. What seems impossible that's the most thrilling thing to me. That's when you feel the most alive, when you think, I don't know if I can do this. but I'm going to give it my best shot. And what you gain from that, what you learn from taking on roles like that is invaluable and will last you a lifetime, because that's the only way to test yourself as an actor, is to take on something as profound as Iceman. So that's where this all started. And as I was saying, John saw it. And then that led to some other things that I lucked out getting in television, say, The Good Wife. I did 2 seasons on The Good Wife, and everyone was surprised that I played this rather severe numbers counter and who was not so nice. Or F. Lee Bailey and The People versus O.J. A couple of those that made people go, oh, that's something different. And I continued that kind of work in the theater, whether it was the Douglas Carter Bean play, The Nance, or Angels in America at the National Theater, and then on Broadway. So all of these roads, I feel, have I mean, certainly Roy Cohn in Angels in America was a great mountain to climb. And so it all led to getting this part in this television show. So I feel like I succeeded, and it's not something that that's easy to do. I didn't really, I wondered if I would be able to shift people's perception just a little bit. No, I'm sure there are people who still feel the same way, and I should just be their birthday party clown. But, but some minds you'll never be able to change.
Well, I feel like it's really interesting. Like what you're talking about is essentially, being a character actor who actually gets to play different characters.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's not like my career. It's not like, I was with Ringling Brothers for 30 years. If you look at my resume on Broadway and off Broadway, there are plenty of, I've done the work of Terrence McNally, John Robin Bates, Simon Gray, the first revival of Waiting for Godot, many different things. Yes, there have been there were these big musicals, and a few of them did very well. So people tend to, that's what they see you as. But I always thought of myself as an actor first. And so this has been, it was a wonderful experiment. And I really didn't know whether it would pan out, but it has. It's really paid off in getting to do this particular character for John Logan.
Yeah, the episodes I've seen, it really is fascinating how well, not just you, but a lot of the actors I recognize from other roles, like how they, they're very recognizable as themselves, but also feel like this very fresh and integrated ensemble. Like no one feels out of place. Yeah,
and it really impeccably cast and a wonderful group of diverse actors, and from Danny Zavato, who's this terrific young actor and such a great guy, and I really lucked out because we spend so much time together in the show, and it's a really interesting relationship. And or Natalie Dormer, who's a one-woman repertory company in this show. She's just phenomenal, taking on these different guises, or Adriana Barazza, Oscar nominee, playing the matriarch of the Vega family, who's just extraordinary actress. I had this scene with her. I have the scene with her in the 5th episode. It just was one of my favorite days of working on the show. She's just mesmerizing and just a lovely, lovely lady. And it's on and on. Michael Gladys from Mad Men, who's terrific as this town councilman, and Adam Rodriguez, who plays Danny's older brother, Jonathan Nieves, who plays his younger brother, Jessica Garza, who plays his sister. They're tremendously talented people, and I just was on a daily basis was knocked out by their talent.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I hope you don't mind. I wanted to go back a bit. You mentioned having Mike Nichols ask you to come on board the Birdcage, and I wanted to know a little bit more about that. Like, what were those how did you first meet Mike Nichols? What were those conversations like?
You got a few hours? I met Mike, I believe, I think we were rehearsal studios of some kind, and I was rehearsing a play, excuse me, and again, Terrence McNally, his name keeps coming up, and he, I believe, introduced me to Mike, and it was like, meeting God, Mike Nichols. So, and I know he had come to see plays that I was in, but he had never come backstage afterwards to see me at any rate. And then I was doing a play called Laughter on the 23rd Floor, a Neil Simon play. And I had been filming during the day. I'd done a little movie, and I got to the theater at the last minute and sort of raced upstairs and got into costume. I had a very late entrance in the play, and I took a peek from at a certain place in the wings in the curtain, could see sort of the audience, and I saw him and Diane Sawyer. So I thought, oh boy, I better have some coffee. I better be good. It's Mike Nichols. And then he came back afterwards, and I was shocked to see him. And he was very, very kind and complimentary. And he said, I'd like to talk to you about a movie. Could you give me a call tomorrow? And then he explained the next day what was happening, and that he and Elaine had adapted the French film Le Quatrefoil, something they'd always wanted to do. It was one of their favorite comic plots of all time. And that they had Robin Williams, who was going to play Armand. Mm-hmm. Initially, they were going to do it with Steve Martin and Robin. Steve couldn't get out of another commitment. Robin didn't want to play Albert because he had already done Mrs. Doubtfire and didn't want to get in a dress again. So he wanted to play the other part, and then that part opened up. And so I did a screen test, and it all seemed like a dream. And then I was supposed to do a funny thing happen on the way to the Forum, and they were building the show. Scott Rudin was producing, and they were building it around me. And it looked like the film would be a conflict with the show, and I had to turn it down. I said, I can't, they've done all this, they're preparing, I can't leave them in the lurch. They're doing this for me. So I'm going to have to say no, which was heartbreaking. And then, so in the meantime, I was still doing the play, the Neil Simon play, and I would hear from Mike from time to time. He would call me. He called me once from Ireland in my dressing room and said, we keep seeing a lot of people, and I just keep thinking you're the guy. And I said, well, Mike, nothing would make me happier than to be able to do this. But I said, I don't have any power. I said, perhaps if you called Scott Rudin, you could, work something out. I said, but I can't, there's nothing I can do about this. And he said, yes. And then he called Scott Rudin, and then Scott Rudin called me and said, we'll postpone for a year, but just know we're, you better do this movie, just know what you're doing. And I said, I know, I can't, I will be forever in your debt. Thank you so much. And it all worked out. And of course it wound up helping the show, because by the time we opened the show, the movie had opened, and in one rare event in my career, it was a successful movie, and people were talking about it, and and it certainly enhanced the box office in terms of a kind of national recognition, that I was sort of known in the New York theater circle, but not nationally. Although I had been in The Lion King, the original Lion King, not the Billy Eichner film. So, it was, but the Birdcage was just a magical experience. Mike treated me as if I was a movie star, mm-hmm. which I wasn't. and he would keep me informed of what was going on, and he would say to me, you know, Nathan, this is how he talked. I only want nice people on this movie. And I said, yeah, I like nice people. That would be good. Nice and talented. And he did. He put together a really terrific group of brilliant actors and really nice people, led by Robin, who was just the kindest and sweetest, most generous soul who ever lived. Yeah. And it's very touching that after all of these years, that that the movie still works, people still find it funny and moving, and so I'm very proud of it, and it's it's lovely that it comes up every day. But it's such a knockout cast. Gene Hackman, one of my favorite actors, and Diane Wiest, everyone, Hank Azaria, just running away with the whole thing, just brilliant. So it's a very fond memory, and I'm very grateful for it and for what it did for me.
Yeah, I mean, I recently rewatched it, and it is just it does really just hold up so well.
Well, it's funny because when I was a kid and I had moved to New York in the late 70s, it was playing on the Upper East Side. It was the most successful foreign film at that time, and I remember seeing it and just falling in love with it. And it was so, the French film is much more subversive in its way. The gay people are the heroes and the straight people are the villains. And and it's a farce. It started as these two guys, Michel Serrault, the wonderful French actor who played, he's Alban in the French film, and Jean Poiret was a comedy partner. They were a comedy team, and they made lots of television appearances and club appearances. And then he wrote this play, Le Cage aux Folles, for the two of them to do. And it ran for years in Paris and was a great success. And then they made the film was sort of a French-Italian co-production. And Ugo Tognazzi took over the role Poiret had played. And they added, these two rather key scenes that are so memorable, and really the scene of when he runs away and he's going to go to the cemetery to die, mm-hmm. and in the French film, it's Ugo Tognazzi is sitting with him at a bus stop, and they have that scene where he basically says, without you in my life, there's no point to the whole thing. So I can't live without you because you make me laugh. And then Robin and I had a similar sequence in the Birdcage where we're sitting in that I guess it is a bus stop, yeah. But it's in front of that view of the ocean and the big ship going by, and I had kept asking for a palimony agreement, and they have that wonderful scene where he makes me sign it, and it's sort of like a little marriage ceremony. And it's very, very, very touching, and it's my favorite scene in the film. And then the other scene they added was where he comes out in a suit, a plain black suit, in trying to help, in the pink socks. It's incredibly moving. So I had loved the first one enormously, and I thought it was just this fantastic piece. So. And so it was wonderful to get to finally to play that part. I mean, I stole everything I could from Michel Serrault, down to the shrieking and the high-pitched screams every time something went wrong.
I think there's a quote about how, good artists borrow, great artists steal.
That's right. That's right. Well, look, they invented it. They wrote, it was their thing, and so. Yeah. So yes, I had to. No, I thought, oh, that's too good to to be snobby about. I'm definitely doing that.
Absolutely. You brought up The Lion King, which I feel like is something you get asked about a lot. but I'm curious because one of the things that strikes me about that movie is the fact that it comes from that era of animation where I guess kind of like the pre-Shrek era, where it wasn't a big the publicity around a movie didn't make a big deal about who was cast in it, and a lot of times it was just like a lot of voice actors just who are to this day relatively unknown played major roles in these films. And for you, what was the casting process like?
I was doing this rather celebrated production of Guys and Dolls on Broadway in 1992. And the actor Ernie Sabella, who played Pumbaa, was playing Harry the Horse in that. I went to this audition, and then Ernie was going to be auditioning after me, and or maybe he went in first. I think that was it. He went in first, and then I followed him, and I said to the guy running it, could I read with Ernie? I'm reading for Three Hyenas. It would be good to have someone to play off of. And so Ernie and I went in and improvised a bit, and then went and had something to eat. And then months went by, and they contacted us and said, well, we don't want you for the hyenas, but we're developing these other two characters of a meerkat and a warthog, this kind of comic relief, because the film is a little heavy. Mm-hmm. And so we said, oh, great, And then that led to it was 2 years, or I don't know how long, 2, 3, mm-hmm. Maybe 2 years of recording. And it's like going out of town with a musical or something. They storyboard it and they put it together and they see what works and they try different musical numbers. And and they wanted, initially, they wanted a kind of, in these two characters, this sort of musical comedy energy. They certainly wanted a kind of New York, the Damon Runyon, Brooklynese, whatever we were doing in Guys and Dolls. They wanted a little of that flavor. They wanted it to differentiate between the two of us. They wanted Ernie to speak in a lower register. And I remember him saying to them, oh, you mean like Wallace Beery, the famous character actor of the 30s. And he started to talk like Wallace Beery in a very slow and deliberate manner. And they said, yeah, that's good. And then they said, and so you should be in a higher register, and you in a more, you go more the Brooklyn route, mm-hmm. like a Brooklyn cab driver. And that's sort of what influenced the playing of those scenes. And the other thing that I remember is that Ernie, they would bring us in, we were doing a show 8 times a week, and they would bring us in early in the morning. And so I was tired, and it was hard to get going with that amount of energy early in the morning. And Ernie, to make me laugh, would make fart noises. He would be talking as Pumbaa, and then he would just go, he would just make fart noises. And it would make me laugh. And he did it often enough that eventually they put it into the script. They put it into the song. They used it, and it became sort of a running gag about Pumbaa because of Ernie's, trying to boost my morale. Yeah, and it went on for so long. You thought, well, who knows? And it was not. It was one of those movies. They were much more excited at Disney about Pocahontas. Mm-hmm. They didn't think much of this. It had started as a film called King of the Jungle, and then there was a shift, and they brought in another writer and other directors, and it became The Lion King. And then and Jeffrey Katzenberg was involved with it at that point, and I think really encouraged them to use these two characters in the film for the comedy. And I can remember doing a press thing. We did a big promotional thing where Jeffrey came out with lions, and Ernie and I would come out with it. We had a little band, and we sang Hakuna Matata, and they showed 2 clips from it. And I think they showed maybe the Hakuna Matata number. No, maybe they didn't do that. But they showed the wildebeest stampede.
Mm.
which was in terms of CGI was a rather extraordinary thing at that point. And to me, it was sort of, I just remember thinking, wow, this is heavy stuff. The father gets killed. And then they add, it's like Bambi, but worse, because they added guilt. They had Jeremy Irons, who was so phenomenal, who came in and said, Simba, what have you done? And, he was like, oh, guilt on top of it. So the people were so relieved when those two characters showed up. I mean, the laughs were double what they would have been normally. So I did think, wow, I think this might be something special. Little did I know.
Yeah, I'm just, of all the things I want to ask you about that, the first thing that comes to mind is, did you ever ask the animators or the producers, what about
you making?
What?
How much are you making?
No kidding. But no, just, what was it about, your performance or your persona that made them think meerkat?
Oh, I have no idea whether that was something they already had in mind, or I don't think it had anything to do with me initially. Of course, when you're recording, they will video that. Mm-hmm. And they did incorporate gestures of mine into this, and on screen, when it was up close, he didn't look so tiny, but it was always very funny when you saw the warthog, and then Timon was this little thing. Mm-hmm. And but I would see, one point I said, "Oi, carnivores," and then I would put my head in my hand, and there was a gesture. Apparently, it's a signature gesture of mine. I've done in many a play, particularly comedy, where I've gone like this, and to see this little meerkat do that, he's just sort of put his head in his hands, and I thought, well, or you saw a little of yourself, or his little eyebrows moving. I don't why they came up with a warthog and a meerkat. I don't know, because a warthog would probably eat a meerkat if given half a chance. But it was. I guess it was fate. It was kismet.
How do you feel about voice acting? Is it something you really enjoy doing? Is it kind of just, a quick diversion?
It's fun. If the material is good, it's really fun. I sort of had a heyday of voice acting. I haven't done it in a long time. It's kind of, they just gave up on me. But I did it, and in particular for Disney, we did there was Lion King, and then we did there was a little series of Pumbaa and Timon, an animated series that I did. I think I did the first season or a season and a half, and then I said, well, that's enough of that. And then I did a series for them called Teacher's Pet, where based on the fabulous drawings of Gary Baseman. So it was a truly surreal-looking animated series about a dog who dresses as a boy because he wants to go to school and learn. And it was musical. It was written by Bill and Sherry Steinkellner, who had done Cheers, and they'd written television. And so it was rather sophisticated for that kind of Saturday morning show. It might have been a little too much sophistication for America, and because it was also rather subversive looking. It was, the characters were, some of them were bordered on grotesque. And it was me and Jerry, the late great Jerry Stiller, the sweetest man, and so hilariously funny, and David Ogden Stiers, who's also no longer with us, as I want to say one was a cat. I think David was a cat and Jerry was a bird. That's right. He was like a parakeet, and he had a cigar.
Of course.
And the thing, I won an Emmy. It won a Peabody, I believe it was. And I did that a couple of seasons, and then I said, that's enough of that. And because, Disney, they won't pay you anything. So they're the ones who make the money. I don't know. You read the small print. That's what you find out. Anyway, I never stayed on. So there's been a group of men who have taken over and imitated me for years. Sure. And then another fun one I did was for HBO with my very good friend Andrea Martin. We did a series called George and Martha, not based on the Albee Virginia Woolf, but based on this famous children's books about these two hippos who were best friends, George and Martha. And I did that for a couple of years as well. We had a wonderful time recording that. So
were you able to record together?
What?
Were you able to record?
Yes, we recorded that together in New York. Yeah, and we had a blast. So that was my voiceover heyday.
Well, there are some other there's one I remember really well. It's a movie for some reason I've never stopped thinking about, with Titan AE, which had a really good voice cast, and your role in that was really fun.
That's the one that brought down Fox Animation.
Yes, it did destroy a studio, but
it just happened to destroy a studio. But don't blame me. Matt Damon was the star.
Yeah,
it was Matt Damon, Bill Pullman, Janine Garofalo, John Leguizamo, and I was some lizard-like creature who talked like Boris Karloff. Preed, yeah. Well, that wasn't a favorite of mine, but yes, there are some Comic-Con nerds who really like that Titan AE. They spent a lot of money on it, and which is why the Fox Animation went under.
Yeah,
they had big hopes, and yeah.
So I don't want. We've talked for a while, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I guess again, I know it's hard to talk about the future right now just because things are so uncertain. But for you personally, beyond following the news, what are you keeping busy with right now?
Well, this. I've done more press than I ever have for anything in my entire life. It's weird to do a junket from home in your sweatpants, but essentially that's what I've done for this TV show. But it's also because I'm very proud of it, and I think it's a really, really well written and beautifully acted show, yeah. So mainly that's what I've been doing, a lot of press for the show.
It's a really fascinating watch.
Yeah, it gets, and as it goes on, it gets more and more interesting and complicated, and yeah. So you try to structure your days. That's important, because otherwise, you wake up, you have some coffee, you think, I'm going to do some vacuuming, and then the next thing you know, it's 5 p.m. and time for another nap. So it's good to structure your days to, get out, walk, do a little exercise, all of that. Yeah, but, reading and binge watching Normal People on Hulu, beautiful show.
Oh, yeah.
Two extraordinary performances by those young actors. Yeah. Third season of Ozark was fantastic. That's all you can do. Try not to eat too much. Try not to eat your emotions. Try to remain calm. Don't scream too much at the TV when Trump comes on.
All of that is really good advice. Well, thank you again for your time today. It's been such a pleasure, and stay safe, stay healthy.
You too. Stay safe, stay healthy.